House Republicans have concluded their three-day issues conference in Miami, where they've been discussing a number of issues that they're going to tackle in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And most notably is the budget reconciliation, which we've been talking about quite a bit. Now, this is well, absolutely critical to the Republicans advancing the America First agenda. This is the vehicle they're going to have to use. Did they come to an agreement? Well, joining me now to offer us an insider's perspective is Congressman Andy Ogles, who serves on the House Financial Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. He represents the 5th Congressional District of Tennessee. Congressman Ogles, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
Well, thank you for having me, as always.
Before we jump into the issues conference, I want to get your take on the announcement that the drones, these mysterious drones that were flying over New Jersey at the end of last year, those were authorized by the FAA. The federal government knew they were flying. Why didn't they say that?
Exactly. I speculated, I didn't speak on anything that was confidential, that it was likely our drones that were testing new equipment, and they needed a noisy backdrop to do it. That's why they picked that New Jersey corridor, because if you're truly going to test a technology, you need noise in the background to know if it's actually working. And so with that, now you have Caroline coming out and saying essentially that, maybe not in quite such detail, but that being said, it just speaks, I think, to the ineptitude of the Biden administration. They can't read the room. They were disconnected from the American people. Their policies failed across the board, whether it's the southern border or on their foreign policy. Our enemies are on the move or were on the move because of Joe Biden. And so this is just a symptom of a greater problem with the Biden administration, that they did not have a commander in chief. He was asleep at the wheel, or quite frankly, asleep upstairs. And we were ungoverned, quite frankly, for 4 years.
I mean, you had local law enforcement, asking questions. I mean, they were allocating resources to do this. They even had contacted the FBI, and the FBI says, we don't know. We don't know anything about it. I mean, this is, it's really inexplicable, quite frankly.
Well, again, the mismanagement, you had federal resources that were in play. You had local law enforcement that was spinning up. You had a hysteria sweeping the nation over what this may or may not be. Was it China? Was it otherworldly? What was it? And again, I speculated from the very beginning, it's us, guys. Otherwise, there would have been jet scrambled and we would have had to do something about it. But that being said, the Biden administration was silent. Resources were wasted. People were concerned. And at the end of the day, it was us doing what we do. We're testing technology to keep the homeland safe.
All right, Congressman Ogles, let's talk about the issues conference that wrapped up today. What are the next steps? Were we able to reach an agreement on the way forward with reconciliation?
Well, I won't say that we have an agreement. I think there's a framework in place, as currently, I'm, depending on what metric you looked at, I'm ranked the most conservative member of the House and the Senate. So it doesn't go far enough for me when you're looking at we've got to start cutting. We've got to create new muscle memory where we're looking for places to cut waste and fraud and abuse. But that being said, there's guideline that has been given to the committees to look for, and there's targeted numbers. And I think there's going to be expectation of that the package put together. Now, quite frankly, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's a stretch, but $1.6 trillion. I don't know that number will actually ever be realized. And that's part of the problem with DC math, right, is that they throw out these big numbers that quite frankly are unattainable. And what people really want is, what did you cut today? How did you trim the budget in the same way American households are having to trim the budget? What did you actually cut? Not future cuts on future spending. What did you actually cut to save taxpayers money? And so that's, I think, the brass tacks. That's what the number that we have to get to. And then tell the American people what we're actually getting done versus some sort of projection that's hard to actually ever measure. So, but again, that's my job as a member of Congress and someone who's on the board of the House Freedom Caucus, is to pull the conference to the right, to argue and debate like John Quincy Adams loved the House of Representatives, because we argue and we debate here. Ultimately, we'll land the plane, but we want it to be as conservative and tax frugal as possible so that we save our nation and get out of this debt that is burdening our country.
Agree 100%, but let me further that analogy used of landing the jet. At a certain point, you run out of fuel, and you've got to land it, and you got to choose the runway to land it on. Did you leave the issues conference with at least a timeline of when we've got to come together and do this because the clock is ticking?
Yeah, no, the clock itself is the timeline. And so, for me, I've had a conversation. I had a dinner with the president just a couple of weeks ago where we talked about, is it one bill or is it two bills? I favor the two-bill approach because that's something that we can get done really quickly. We can secure the border. We can tackle the debt ceiling. We can do some big things that he wants done, that the American people want done. And then we can say that the second bill is for the more complex, some of the tax policy. And I think what the problem is when you have one big, beautiful bill, it sounds great in concept, but the larger it is, the more complex it becomes, the harder it is to pass. And so, and I've said that to the speaker. He's a good friend of mine of, look, I'm afraid this is going to be such a gargantuan mess. At the end of the day, it's going to be hard to pass unless you sell us out to the Democratic caucus and you pass it with Democrats, which has been the trend here in Washington, D.C., is they sweeten it, and they sweeten it, and they sweeten it. They put so much junk in there that it's no longer conservative. Look, Donald Trump won every one of the battleground states. He won the popular vote. We were given a mandate to come here and do a job. If you want to lose the midterms, don't deliver on that mandate, because that's what's going to happen. We've got to secure the border. We've got to start cutting. We've got to be fiscally responsible. That's what America wants, and that's what we've got to deliver.
Now, the counter to the one or the two bill approach is that there's some thinking, and I see both sides of this, but is that in order to get some of the conservative votes, you're going to have to put some of the good things in there, like the border, all of those things that people want to see. Debt ceiling, I think, is going to be it's going to be somewhat of a lift to get some of those types of measures. And so I think the thinking is put it all together, and you got to vote for all of it. You think that actually hampers it, or do you think you'll get Republicans to vote for both bills?
Well, the Freedom Caucus, we put out a position that obviously there's certain things that we would want, but we would be willing to lift the debt ceiling if we're acting in a fiscally responsible manner. So we've taken that argument off of the table. We're willing to have that conversation. We're willing to come to the table and get it done. But again, the only way you pass one big bill is if it's full of garbage that the American people don't want, that myself, members of the Freedom Caucus, and Freedom Caucus aligned members of Congress don't want. And so I think we're setting up, the speaker setting us up, and he's my dear friend, for a harder battle, whereas if we separated it, I think it's an easier thing to do. We can articulate quick wins. But to your point, I'm the same way. I'm not married to one bill or two bills. I'm trying to look at this from a very pragmatic standpoint of what can we get done on the timeline that's in front of us, and quite frankly, what's in the best interest of America, of the American people. And a two-bill solution is by far the best choice for the American people.
Well, Congressman Ogles, I would agree with you in that this should be a bill that is passed by Republicans, and hopefully it'll be such that Democrats have to vote for some of it. But I hope it doesn't pass on the back of Democrats, because if that happens, it does say that it's not a really good bill.
Well, that's what this town tends to create, but that's why I ran for Congress. My children's stake. We don't have grandchildren yet, but one day we will. Their future's at stake. Is to come up here and fight these fights and to have these arguments and debates and try to make it a better place, because this place is used to passing garbage. It's used to just getting something done and going home. Whereas I want to stay here, get the work done, don't go home, work 7 days a week, work 30 days a month. Like, let's stay here and get this done. There's no reason why we should be leaving when we've got a hard deadline in front of us. And so, again, I know some of my colleagues don't like to hear that, but we were elected to do a job. I came here to do a job, and I've committed to do it. So keep me 24/7. That's what I'm willing to do and will do to get this done.
Well, as we've heard over and over, this is a unique moment in American history, one that will probably not be repeated again anytime soon. It's like the 6 planets that are in alignment right now. We're not going to see that again in our lifetime, so I think we ought to take full advantage of it. I'm in agreement with you on that. Congressman Andy Ogles, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, sir, and God bless.